Yeah, I guess we'll take it away, Jeremy.
Yeah, Jeremiah,
Awesome.
There it
that's
is.
it. Oh, here we go. Recording on the computer. Awesome. So with us today, our first speaker is Jeremiah LaRue. Did I say it correctly, Jeremiah?
If it's the French version, La Rue, but the Spanish
LaRue.
version, La Rue, I guess, whichever one you want there.
LaRue. Yes, with Thomson Reuters. So Jeremiah has been a friend and colleague, been at various events during the past few years. And today we're going to be covering maximizing your firm's use of information. How to get back after COVID-19, back into the action, back into the processes. So we're excited to hear all the different strategies, because I know you guys have so many resources and information. So again, if anybody has any questions, type them into the Q&A box. But if you have a random comment or saying hi, you could use the chat. But yeah, awesome. With that said, Jeremiah, take it away.
Gracias, Antonio. Thank you so much for the introduction and, of course, the opportunity and the platform here to be able to share some of the resources, the information, and the knowledge that we have here at Thomson Reuters with the Latino Tax Pro member firms. And what I have here in front of you is a presentation that I'd like to go through with you today that is titled Maximize Your Firm's Use of Information. But I'm going to take you through a journey in which I think you can relate to, where we're bombarded with information and we're bombarded with things that are new to us as a firm and new to us as tax practitioners. And so how can we manage that in light of what's going on in our current situation? A lot of states and a lot of folks are reopening with the post-COVID lockdown, and many states are starting to get back to everyday life. And so what can we do at Thomson Reuters to help your firm maximize how you're using information and how you're able to take information to idea to actual action and move forward with it. So before I get started, I just want to introduce myself briefly. Like Tony said, my name is Jeremiah LaRue. I am the tax workflow product manager here at Thomson Reuters. And some of you may have seen me in some of the other Latino Tax Pro sessions in the past. It's always an enjoyable opportunity to work with Latino tax pros. So without further delay, I wanted to get started here by grabbing your attention to the sky. And if you look at the sky here that I've got on the screen, there's a lot of stars that you can imagine. And I want to just grab your attention for a moment and draw your attention towards the abundance of stars in the sky. And as a matter of fact, there's 48 million stars in what I've seen or researched as the observable universe. So 48 million stars that we can observe and see. Not trying to get into what we can't see, but the stars that are out there that you can see maybe on this picture and within an observable distance is 48 million. Well, let's compare that to information. And you may have heard today's day and age referred to as the data age, or today is the day of data. Well, to put that into perspective, there's 44 zettabytes that has been quantified for our current digital universe. So when we consider what the digital universe is, there's you may have heard a regular old byte, and typically in a daily setting, most of us operate using bytes and interact with bytes. Well, of course, there's kilobytes, there's megabytes, and so on and so forth, gigabytes, terabytes, petabytes, exabytes, and zettabytes is keep adding multiple zeros and zeros and zeros. My point being is that it's enormous. And comparing the two universes, our observable universe in the sky and the observable digital universe, the digital universe, comparing the amount of bytes to the amount of stars, is 40 times more bytes in the digital universe than there are stars in our observable universe. So that's pretty crazy. To put that into perspective there, there's a lot of data out there. As a tax and accounting firm, how are you managing that data? What does the flow of that data look like in your firm? How is your staff members reacting to the new data that maybe comes into your firm on a daily and even hourly basis? So to get into maybe some of our goals and our description of what we're going to talk about here for the next 50 roughly minutes, you can see the description, and you may have read this leading into the session. Of course, COVID has caused a revolving door of legislative changes, from CARES Act, the Families First Coronavirus Act, and even some talk of some new legislation here as well. So for firms to decipher what is important for them to communicate and share out with their clients can sometimes be difficult. So that's what we're going to talk about today is what are ways for us to be able to create a standard workflow document to help us to maximize a capacity as a firm to quickly interpret, analyze, and act upon new information as it happens. We'll take a look at standard workflow documents, and then we'll dig deep into what that means for us with information. And then beyond that, we've got to communicate with our clients, of course, and what does that look like? How can we maximize the effectiveness of that through social media, targeted client communications, and other things. Towards the end, I'll share with you some of the different resources that we do have at Thomson Reuters to help you along this process in terms of becoming an information champion and facilitating that information workflow at your firm. So what are the goals? And I like to kind of put out what the agenda is, or even better yet, what are some of the learning objectives by the time we're done here today? What I hope to leave you with? Well, I hope to show you what it means to create a business process document for your firm. Having experience as a technical consultant for a number of years, working for a software company, I have worked with firms in customizing various types of standard workflow documents, and business process documents. We'll talk about the difference between the two. And so I want to talk about what that means and how you can consider implementing those if you don't already have them. We'll talk about an information workflow. I hope that you can become an information leader for your staff members, for your clients and your community, and understanding what that means to be able to analyze and act upon new information. And then towards the end, we'll talk about, of course, needing to maximize or talk to clients. So I want to go ahead and kick things off here by defining what is a workflow. And when we see this image on the screen here, oftentimes we think of workflows in a variety of ways. Workflows are oftentimes met with time deadlines. Workflows oftentimes involve decision-making points. Workflows oftentimes require the need of multiple people and staff members to collaborate towards a shared goal and shared vision. Ultimately, the easiest, most simple answer I can provide for what is a workflow is it's a sequence of tasks that processes a set of data. And oftentimes that involves a start and an end. And the tasks allow the data to move from a raw data point from the beginning to a more processed and refined end result. That's the output. So that's the most simple definition that I'll throw out here for a workflow. But then we start to get into putting into practice, and we can define workflow loosely. There's numerous things that we can identify as a workflow, but what's really important for your firm to dig into when it comes to defining a workflow for your firm and for your staff members. So one of the things I want to make sure to share with you is what isn't a workflow before we get into some of the more practical application pieces here. What isn't a workflow are things like checklists. I'm sure at your firm you've got a level of things that we must get done and checklists that must get done. But if they're not sharing the same end goal or end result, there's not a shared common through line for each of those items in that checklist, then it's just a list of tasks. A workflow implies that there is a shared end goal that we're trying to accomplish. And whenever there's data that's passed between humans and or systems, meaning the technology behind the humans, a workflow is created. So workflows are ultimately how things go from undone to done, or from raw to processed. And we can talk about that in the tax and accounting industry, as well as any other industry that you can think of that the concept of workflow applies to. So when we talk about taking this to the next level, and in particular, the next level that I want to take this to is a business process document. And some of you may have heard the idea of creating business processes at your firm, and this may be some review, but I want to give you a number of practical applications here and takeaways around how we can go from oftentimes a basic outline of what a workflow is to a true living and breathing business process document that's meant to drive efficiency at your firm. So how is this concept of a business process document different than a workflow? Again, a simple answer I want to throw out there to directly reply is a workflow simply represents the various paths that are available to get from point A to point B, as documented maybe by your firm or any other instance. The business process document takes it a step further to create a standardized, repeatable process that can contain automation, intelligence, and is designed to be scalable. So the business process document takes that workflow and expands upon it, allowing a firm to achieve efficiency and empower their staff members to really do more with less, which I know firms are always trying to do. So I want to maybe do a mental exercise with you here if I can. We've been talking about workflows. We're now introducing this topic of a business process document. I want to use the analogy of a train and talking about trains and the different elements involved in transporting goods or transporting people in trains. And when you think about a train, I've got a few visuals here to go along with my analogy. The train tracks are representative of a workflow. And the train tracks are really an outline that shows what it takes to get the payload from point A to point B. And maybe there's different endpoints, maybe there's a point C or point D, but the idea is that the train tracks are the workflow. It's the simple outline that facilitates the flow of the data. So the second part of the analogy is you've got the payload, which I'm going to actually, before I get to that one, I don't have a visual here, but the payload, I alluded to it a moment ago, whether that's people in a carrier train or that's goods, maybe in a transportation good train there as well, that payload represents the data. So in your firm, that data oftentimes is tax related data. That's accounting data. That's your client data that's moving through the workflow. And you can document that and you can see that moving throughout by creating a business process document. So a couple of pieces here to reiterate: our tracks are the workflow. The payload is the data itself. The cars, or the train cars now, those are the platforms and the systems that we're using. Oftentimes for tax and accounting firms, that's the technology that's facilitating the transfer of the data. And then lastly, to bring our analogy, hopefully to a nice full circle here, is our train stations. The train stations will allow us to represent milestones or tasks along the way in that journey of that business process. We talk about various types of business processes or various types of workflows. Many firms in practice are utilizing the concept of a project-based workflow, and project-based workflows require tasks and tracking tasks against the goal of the end result, which is maybe it's completing a tax return, maybe it's finishing the monthly bookkeeping, maybe it's processing the biweekly payroll. So the idea is, how can we take a simple workflow, which is the outline, the tracks, in other words, and put the entire picture around that to showcase and define exactly what's occurring along the way to get the information from point A to point B. So after we've talked about this as being a business process document, and I've got some other important considerations, we'll get to the workflow examples here in a moment. But I do want to throw out some really important considerations. And from experience as a consultant working with numerous firms, there's always a balance that firms must achieve. There's never an exact formula that is the solution for all firms when it comes to creating workflows and business process documents. So firms should really attempt to achieve a desired balance for their firm. And again, it comes down to each firm is different, but firms should attempt to achieve a desired balance of the following important workflow dynamics. One, how standardized is my workflow versus how customized? And really, when I work with firms and I talk to them about achieving a level of customized standardization. And we don't want things to be too cookie cutter that we can't cater to individual clients' needs, but we also don't want to create custom one-off engagements that are individual for every single client, because it's simply not scalable and it's not efficient. So there's a balance to be able to have workflows in your office that are standardized, that can be scaled, and that are also customized and cater either to your client or to your firm. Also, the second point here is an important workflow dynamic. How automated is my workflow versus how manual is my workflow? And this second point really gets us into the third point as well, which is how human-driven is my workflow versus how machine-driven is it? And the more that we see technology advance and the more that we see the different technologies that are applied to the tax workflows that are used in practice, that's again a balance that must be observed and talked about within your firm, and identifying how automated are we truly, because there's going to be that balance that needs to occur. So let's put this back into the framework of, well, what are we doing today? What is our current set of workflows that maybe my firm should consider documenting if I'm not already doing so? Again, each firm should prioritize which workflows are important, and every firm's different. But I want to throw a few out there, and this will probably sound familiar to you and your firm. One being a new client onboarding workflow. What does it take when you got a new client coming into the office? Where do we have to set them up? What systems? What information do we need to grab? Is there a handoff process from one staff member to the next related to that new client? The annual tax return workflow. This is a good one, of course, one that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, documenting what does that tax return workflow look like, all the way from the data collection, maybe sending out organizers, through preparation, review, assembly, delivery, and e-file. Beyond that, monthly accounting and bookkeeping workflows as well. Regular payroll processing workflows, maybe weekly or bi-weekly oftentimes. Thinking about accounts payable or accounts receivable workflows that might be invoicing or payment processing at your firm. Those are occurring regular as well. And then another one here is an example is annual or project-based audit workflows. Some firms that might be getting into audit services or audit work. So these are examples that are out there, and I want to go and I think now is a good time for our first polling question. So Tony, I'm going to go ahead and see if we can pass things over to you. And should I discontinue sharing my screen here, or how does the—
Yeah, go ahead and continue, Jeremiah. What I'm going to do, everybody, to make sure everyone's with us, I'm going to launch the polling question. The question is simple. Has your business been affected by COVID-19? Yes, very much so. Yes, somewhat. Not really, not at all. Take a minute to answer. Even if you answer wrong or whatever, we just want to make sure you're still with us, paying attention. And again, if you have any questions during this presentation, please type them into the Q&A, or even a comment, or say saying hi. That way we can make it interactive for sure. So we'll leave it open about 20 more seconds. Again, for you to receive 1 hour of continuing education of tax law, we need you to answer the 3 polling questions we have for today. So this is the first of 3. So no, I was gonna make a comment, Jeremiah, that that stat in the beginning of your presentation, that's crazy. The digital bandwidth, or is it bandwidth, or is it a size, I guess?
It's just the data that's been quantified out there in the digital universe. That's going to be any data on any server anywhere. So it's the quantifiable data that's sitting in the cloud, that's sitting in anywhere.
Yeah, wow.
44 zettabytes of data.
Is that like when you upload a picture, when you do an emoji? That's like a video, any audio?
Yeah, you're putting data out into the universe. Correct. Yep.
Oh man, that's crazy. All right, we're gonna end the polling question here, and then let me share the results. So yeah, everybody's affected by COVID-19, and then the majority were yes, somewhat, and then yes, very much so. So cool, guys. With that said, Jeremiah, let's continue. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for that question, Tony. Of course, the COVID-19 situation did bring to light a number of opportunities, we'll say, for firms to be able to shore up in this area.